From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Does he look hurt?
I can't see him. I don't want to go out there. I don't know what's going on. So they're sending.
So you think he's yelling help?
Yes.
All right, what is your phone number?
Just there's gunshots.
Walking while black. Unarmed African-American teenager Trayvon Martin is shot dead in Florida while walking around his father's gated community. Nearly 1 month after his death, Trayvon's killer remains free, sparking a national outrage.
But this whole situation is a nightmare, and I don't understand why this man has not been arrested, at least charged, and let a judge and jury decide if he's guilty.
We want an arrest. How many nights do they have to go to bed knowing that the killer of their son is walking around free?
As the FBI announces it will investigate the shooting, we'll speak with a local community leader, a president of the Black Law Students Association at Florida A&M, and chair of the Florida Legislative Black Caucus. We'll also talk with a member of Trayvon Martin's family's legal team. And we'll look at how his killing has brought renewed scrutiny of Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The New York Times is reporting a classified war simulation held this month by Pentagon planners found an Israeli attack on Iran would likely lead to a wider regional war, which could draw in the United States and leave hundreds of Americans dead. The so-called war game has reportedly raised fears among top American planners that it may be impossible to preclude American involvement in any escalating confrontation with Iran. In news from Iraq, at least 43 people died and 243 were wounded today in a series of car and roadside bombs. The bombings occurred on the 9th anniversary of the U.S. invasion. The deadliest attack occurred in the southern Shia holy city of Karbala, where twin explosions killed 13 people and wounded 48. In Kirkuk, a car bomb killed 9 people and wounded 42. Blasts also occurred in at least 10 other cities and towns, including Baghdad, Ramadi, and Hilla. Voters in Illinois head to the polls today for the Republican primary. During a campaign stop Monday, Mitt Romney accused rival Rick Santorum of being an economic lightweight.
I'm not an economic lightweight. President Obama is. We're not going to be successful in replacing an economic lightweight with another economic lightweight. We're going to have to replace him with someone who knows how to run this economy.
Rick Santorum responded during a stop in Rockford, Illinois, by calling attention to Romney's ties to Wall Street.
This race is about how we're going to get this economy going. I heard Governor Romney here call me an economic lightweight because I wasn't a Wall Street financier like he was. Do you really believe this country wants to elect a Wall Street financier as the President of the United States? Do you think that's the kind of experience we need? Someone who's going to take and look after, as he did, his friends on Wall Street and bail them out at the expense of Main Street America?
The Justice Department and FBI have launched an investigation into the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin last month in Florida. The unarmed African-American teenager was shot dead by a neighborhood watch volunteer in an Orlando suburb. The shooter, George Zimmerman, remains free and has not been charged with the shooting. We'll have more on the story after headlines. The U.S. Supreme Court hears arguments today in a pair of cases to determine the constitutionality of sentencing 13- and 14-year-olds to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At least 79 juveniles are now serving such life sentences. A manhunt is underway in France for a serial gunman suspected of killing 4 people at a Jewish school on Monday. The same shooter is believed to have killed 3 French soldiers of African and Caribbean descent in earlier attacks this month. Authorities say the same gun and motorcycle were used in those attacks, and the shooter wore a motorcycle helmet. New reports say the gunman wore a small video camera around his neck and may have filmed the attack that killed 3 children and a rabbi at a Jewish school in Toulouse. The U.S. soldier implicated in the massacre of 16 villagers in Afghanistan doesn't remember the incident, his lawyer John Henry Brown said Monday after their first face-to-face meeting.
He doesn't remember everything the evening in question. That doesn't mean he has amnesia.
Brown met the alleged shooter, U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Robert Bales, at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where Bales has been in solitary confinement since arriving there Friday. Bales is accused of gunning down 16 civilians, including 9 children and 3 women. In news from Afghanistan, the Wall Street Journal is reporting the U.S. is considering giving the Afghan government some control for the first time over when and where the U.S. conducts nighttime raids in Afghan villages. In related news, a parliamentary commission in Pakistan is demanding an end to U.S. drone attacks inside the country and an apology for deadly U.S. airstrikes in November that killed 24 Pakistani soldiers. The demand to end drone strikes was one of the first read out by the commission. Russia has announced it's ready to support a United Nations resolution endorsing a plan by UN Arab League Special Joint Envoy Kofi Annan for settling the Syrian crisis. Annan's plan has not been made public, but Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that the resolution should not turn into an ultimatum to the Syrian government. On Monday, Russia joined the International Committee of the Red Cross to ask Syria to ensure a daily pause in fighting to allow humanitarian access. In other news on Syria, Saudi Arabia has reportedly begun delivering military equipment to arm the Free Syrian Army in its fight against President Bashar al-Assad's regime. The announcement comes just days after the Saudi kingdom said it had shut down its embassy in Syria and withdrawn all its staff. Meanwhile, a new report by Human Rights Watch accuses armed opposition groups in Syria of carrying out serious human rights abuses, including kidnapping, detention, and torture of security force members, government supporters, and people identified as members of pro-government militias. Human Rights Watch has also received reports of executions by armed opposition groups. Libya's new government has released 2 British journalists nearly a month after they were detained by a militia in the city of Misrata. Nicholas Davies-Jones and Gareth Montgomery Johnson work for Iran's Press TV. The men were detained shortly after they produced a video report exposing how the militia waged revenge attacks on black Libyans they accused of supporting Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's forces during the war. This is part of the report that aired before their capture.
The ongoing attacks in Libya underscore a sense of lawlessness in the country, and if what is alleged to have taken place in the camp is true, then it could be a damaging setback to the country's interim rulers and the trust placed in the country's new national forces.
In other news from Libya, a dispute has broken out over the possible extradition of former Libyan intelligence chief Abdallah al-Senussi, who is being held in Mauritania. Libya, France, and the International Criminal Court in The Hague have all asked to take him into custody. The ICC has indicted him on 2 counts of crimes against humanity during last year's uprising. Nobel Peace Prize winner and Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf has defended a Liberian law that criminalizes homosexual acts. In Liberia, so-called voluntary sodomy is considered a misdemeanor punishable by up to a year in prison. Sirleaf made the comment during an interview with the Guardian newspaper.
At the moment, voluntary sodomy is illegal at the moment. So, in essence, homosexuality for 2 gay men under the books is illegal in Liberia.
We've got certain traditional values in our society that we'd like to preserve.
So you're saying you wouldn't decriminalize that current law?
I've just said to you, we're going to maintain our traditional values.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who was taking part in the joint interview, refused to criticize Sirleaf's stance.
Given that good governance and human rights go hand in hand, what is your advice to Madam President and Liberia on this gay rights issue?
Yeah, one of the advantages of doing what I do now is that I can choose the issues I get into and the issues I don't. So, for us, the priorities around power, roads, jobs, delivery. I'm not saying these issues aren't important for the President's given her position, and this is not one for me.
The city of Chicago has rejected a permit for the coalition against NATO and the G8 to hold a protest on May 20th, the opening day of the NATO summit. The permit was rejected even though the city had previously granted a permit to the very same group to march 1 day earlier against the now relocated G8 summit. Protest organizers sought to change the date of the protest once the Obama administration moved the G8 summit from Chicago to Camp David. In other protest news, lawmakers in Georgia are considering a bill that would make it illegal for demonstrators to picket outside the homes of corporate executives or outside some businesses. Opponents of the bill include labor unions and environmental organizations, as well as the Atlanta Tea Party. Some 250,000 students are expected to go on strike today in the Canadian province of Quebec to protest tuition hikes planned by the government. The government plan would increase tuition by 75% over the next 5 years. On Sunday, several thousand students participated in a downtown protest march. Last week, protesting students claimed sections of major highways during rush hour. New research has shown women are paying $1 billion more each year than men for the same health insurance coverage. The report from the National Women's Law Center says 92% of the top plans in states that permit so-called gender rating charge women more, even though most of those plans don't cover maternity care. In most cases, female non-smokers are also charged more than male smokers, simply because they're women. The Obama administration's new health care law will ban gender rating starting in 2014. A new UN report says Jewish settlers in the West Bank have seized dozens of water sources and are using violence and intimidation to block Palestinian access. The report found 56 springs that were under some degree of settler control, including 30 that were claimed completely. Some Palestinians said they were afraid to approach water sources out of fear of violence from settlers. And WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has announced he'll run for a seat in the Australian Senate. Assange is under house arrest in Britain. He was born in Australia and grew up there. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.